Before the high-rise public housing buildings, before King Von's rise to fame, and long before drill music became a global sensation.
So we call it drill music.
Drill music. Okay, cool,
Drill
cool,
music.
cool,
Like
cool.
how you all hyped up and just
No doubt.
ready to go crazy.
There was 6400 South King Drive, a place where joy flourished. In 1905, 6400 South King Drive was home to White City Amusement Park, drawing crowds from all corners of Chicago's South Side. For nearly 30 years, White City was the beating heart of the South Side, a lively escape where families, friends, and strangers gathered to share moments of fun, laughter, and carefree days. But like so many good things, the fun couldn't last forever. By 1934, White City was no more. The park shut down, and the land, which had been a symbol of happiness and community, sat empty for years waiting for its next chapter. As the decades passed, Chicago's South Side began to grow rapidly, and by the 40s and 50s a new vision emerged, a vision of housing to meet the needs of a booming population. The space where White City once stood transformed into what we now know as Parkway Gardens. Built in the early 1950s, Parkway Gardens was meant to be the shining example of public housing, a model of modernity and hope. High-rise buildings, wide green spaces, and a design aimed at fostering a tight-knit, safe community all seemed perfect for a time of growth and optimism.
This was considered the elite property for doctors, lawyers, nurses, professional people that lived over here.
But as the years wore on, cracks began to show. By the 70s, the shine had worn off. The economy faltered, and with it, the housing complex's infrastructure deteriorated. Roofs leaked, elevators stopped working, and plumbing failed. The very systems meant to keep people safe and comfortable crumbled. Worse still, the city failed to step in to make repairs. With no maintenance or support, Parkway Gardens became a haven for trouble. What was meant to be a sanctuary quickly became a breeding ground for crime and social decay. Then came the 80s, the decade that would leave a scar on the South Side. The crack cocaine epidemic hit Chicago like a tidal wave, and Parkway Gardens was ground zero. Gangs like the Black Disciples, who would later leave their mark on the infamous O Block, tightened their grip on the area. This wasn't just kids hanging out on street corners. It was about entire blocks being controlled by gangs that fought for territory, power, and control. As with most situations around America, violence followed the drugs. Shootings became a regular occurrence, and residents found themselves living in a constant state of fear. The police, who were supposed to protect them, often made things worse. Their presence wasn't a solution, it was another layer of tension. Without support from the government, the people who called Parkway Gardens home were left to face a vicious cycle of poverty, violence, and addiction. By the 1990s, Parkway Gardens was one of the most notorious public housing projects in Chicago. The government, instead of fixing the issues, decided that the answer was to demolish these large housing complexes, a process that started in the late 1990s. While some of the older, dilapidated public housing projects were demolished, Parkway Gardens held on, and the community continued to suffer. The projects weren't just physical buildings. They were a reflection of a much larger systemic issue: the neglect of poor Black communities in Chicago and cities across America. From the late 2000s into the early 2010s, Parkway Gardens became infamous for a surge in gang violence, particularly among teenagers and young adults. The increase in crime was linked to a larger shift in the city's gang dynamics. Parkway Gardens, which had been a housing complex for low-income families, was caught in the crossfire when the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA, demolished the notorious Robert Taylor homes, which were roughly 3 miles southwest of Parkway Gardens. These 28 red brick 16-story buildings had been a stronghold for the Black Disciples and a hotbed for crime. Suddenly, Parkway Gardens became a war zone, a battleground between two of Chicago's deadliest gangs. As the 2010s approached, the 6400 block of South King Drive became infamous as one of the most dangerous spots in the city. Within that time period, a man by the name of Odie Perry a respected member of the Black Disciples and popular figure in Parkway Gardens, was gunned down in retaliation for a previous gang-related shooting. On the night of his murder, OD decided to ride his bike to a store, accompanied by a friend. After leaving the store around 11:34 p.m., he started riding north on Martin Luther King Drive. Moments later, gunshots rang out, and his friend saw OD fall from his bike. Despite trying to escape, the shooter continued to pursue OD, shooting him again before fleeing. Rumors spread that his death was part of a gang retaliation for Tuka, a well-known member of the rival gangster Disciples, murder, with the shooting allegedly happening on Tuka's birthday as a statement of revenge. Being someone with great respect and notoriety in the area, his death would become infamous for being a pivotal moment in the gang violence in Chicago. To pay respect to Perry, Parkway Gardens was given the name O-Block by many in the area. The name O-Block stuck, and Parkway Gardens was no longer just a housing complex. It had become a cultural landmark, forever tied to the legacy of OD and the violence that had shaped it. As O-Block began to gain more attention, it also fostered the environment that birthed drill music. The very same gangs that had battled for control of the streets were now shaping a new sound in hip-hop, and Parkway Gardens was at the heart of it. But despite the chaos, the music from O-Block became a way for the youth in the area to rise above the violence, making their voices heard in ways the world had never seen before. Parkway Gardens faced its challenges from day one, but it gave birth to a culture that influenced the world, proving that even in the toughest of circumstances, something more can emerge.
When Goofy do that crash, we gon' spin again. We gon' hit our last friends. We gon' show him we ain't playing. We gon' leave him where he stand. That's really, yeah, that's all I wanna be, successful.